Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we are diving deep into a really important idea in any democracy: power sharing. We're going to look at how different countries manage having all sorts of different people living together. And we'll see what happens when they get it right, and what happens when they get it very, very wrong. It's a decision that can literally build a country up or tear it completely apart. Now, you might think that sharing power just means dividing it up, making the country weaker. But is that actually true? Or could it be that sharing power is the secret sauce to keeping a diverse country strong and united? That is the big question we're going to tackle today. So here's our game plan. We'll kick things off with a story of two democracies and see how their choices led to totally different outcomes. Then we'll get into why power sharing is so critical. After that, we'll check out the four main ways to do it. And finally, we'll bring it all home and see how these ideas work right here in India. All right, our story starts with two small but pretty complex countries. We've got Belgium over in Europe, and then we have the island nation of Sri Lanka in South Asia. Both are democracies, and both have a mix of different communities. But as we're about to see, they chose completely different ways to handle it. First up, let's talk about Belgium. It's a pretty small country in Europe. To give you some perspective, it's actually smaller in area than the state of Haryana in India. Its population is just over 1 crore, which is about half of Haryana's. But don't let its small size fool you. Its social fabric is incredibly intricate. Let's break down who lives there. You can see the country is mainly split by language. About 59% of the people live in the Flemish region and speak Dutch. Then you have 40% who live in the Wallonia region and speak French. And there's this tiny 1% that speaks German. So countrywide, the Dutch speakers are the majority. But here's where it gets really interesting. In the capital city, Brussels, the whole situation was flipped on its head. There, the French speakers were actually the majority and the Dutch speakers were the minority. This created a super tense dynamic because the French-speaking community, while a minority in the country, was generally more wealthy and powerful. Okay, now let's head south to Sri Lanka. It's an island nation, just off the southern coast of India. And just like Belgium, it has a diverse population of about 2 crore people. Again, pretty similar to Haryana. So we've got two countries, roughly the same size, both dealing with diversity. Now in Sri Lanka, the population mix is quite different. The biggest group by far is the Sinhala speakers. They make up a huge 74% of the population. The next largest group is the Tamil speakers at 18%, and they're split between Sri Lankan Tamils and Indian Tamils. So you see, unlike Belgium's more balanced split, Sri Lanka has one very clear, very dominant majority. So faced with these complex societies, how did these two democracies respond? Well, this is exactly where their paths split, and they went in completely opposite directions. One chose cooperation and peace. The other chose dominance and force. To really get Sri Lanka's story, we have to understand this word: majoritarianism. It's a big one. After Sri Lanka got its independence in 1948, its leaders fully embraced this idea. Basically, it's the belief that because the Sinhala community was the majority, they should be able to run the country however they wanted, without any regard for what the Tamil minority wanted or needed. And the paths they took could not have been more different. Look at Sri Lanka on the left. In 1956, they passed a law that made Sinhala the only official language. They started giving preferential treatment to Sinhala applicants for university spots and government jobs. The state also promoted Buddhism. Now, look at Belgium on the right. They did the total opposite. They changed their constitution 4 times to make sure power was shared. They guaranteed equal numbers of ministers in the central government, and they even created separate state and community governments. And the results? Well, they speak for themselves. In Sri Lanka, majoritarianism made the Tamil population feel completely isolated and ignored. It destroyed the relationship between the two communities, and eventually it plunged the country into a long and brutal civil war. Meanwhile, in Belgium, their approach of accommodation meant they avoided all that conflict. They kept their country united and came up with a system that everyone, for the most part, could agree on. The stories of Belgium and Sri Lanka teach us a really powerful lesson, don't they? But let's go a bit deeper and unpack the basic reasons why sharing power is such a good idea for any democracy. So why was the Belgian model so successful? Well, it really comes down to 2 different but equally important types of reasons. First, there's what we call a prudential reason. Now, prudential is just a fancy word for being practical and sensible. It's the smart play. When you share power, you reduce the chances of conflict between different groups. And when there's social peace, you get political stability. Trying to force the will of the majority on everyone else might seem like an easy win at first, but like we saw in Sri Lanka, in the long run, it can completely destroy the unity of a country. And second, there's a deeper moral reason. Power sharing is, quite simply, the very spirit of democracy. Think about it. A democratic system isn't really legitimate if the people don't have a voice in how they're governed. It means sharing power with the people who will be affected by the decisions made. It's just the right thing to do. Okay, so we've established why sharing power is a good thing, but how do you actually do it? Let's break down the 4 most common ways power is shared. You can think of this as the essential toolkit for building a healthy democracy. First up is what we call horizontal distribution. This is where power is shared between the different branches of government that are all at the same level. You have the legislature, which makes the laws, the executive, which carries them out, and the judiciary, which makes sure the laws are fair. This creates a system of checks and balances, which is crucial because it ensures no one branch can become all-powerful. Second, we have vertical distribution. This is all about sharing power between governments at different levels. So you have a main government for the entire country, what we usually call the central or union government. Then you have governments for states or provinces, and even down to the local level, like cities and villages. This structure is what we call federalism. The third way is sharing power among different social groups, like religious communities or language groups. The perfect example of this is that community government they have in Belgium. Remember? The Dutch, French, and German-speaking communities each have their own government with the power to make decisions about things like culture, education, and language. And finally, the fourth way is sharing power among political parties and other groups. You see, in a democracy, the competition between different parties is a form of power sharing itself. It makes sure power never stays with one group for too long. And sometimes when no single party wins a clear majority, they have to team up and form a coalition government, which is a very direct way of sharing power. All right, let's bring all this theory back home. How can we see these different forms of power sharing in action right here in India, one of the biggest and most diverse democracies on the planet? India is a fantastic example of all this. We absolutely have vertical power sharing in our federal system. Power is divided between the central government, the various state governments, and our local governments through the Panchayati Raj system. To give social groups a voice, we have things like reserved constituencies for scheduled castes and tribes, which make sure they are represented. And of course, our political system, with so many parties competing and often forming coalition governments, is a perfect example of that fourth type of power sharing. So let's do a quick recap of the big ideas. First, the story of our 2 countries shows that accommodation, like Belgium did, leads to unity, while majoritarianism, like in Sri Lanka, leads to conflict. Second, power sharing isn't a weakness. It's crucial for both practical stability and for the moral heart of democracy. And finally, remember that power can be shared in several ways: horizontally between branches, vertically between levels, and among various social and political groups. If you liked this video and found it helpful, please like, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel, The ACE Archive, for more easy explanations.